Welcome back to Central Valley Talk. This current program is about business, about investing, about insurance, how you handle your money and how you make things work well for you. We've asked an expert to come in and give us some advice and talk to us about what we're doing, see if we're on the right track or we need to get onto a new track. Welcome, John Grace from Investors Advantage Corporation. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be back with you.
Now you're down somewhere in Southern California?
Yes, sir. Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village, that neighborhood.
Yeah. Let me ask you, we were talking before we came on the air, and you're talking about maybe what we could do for the next crash, or avoiding the crash, or make sure the crash doesn't come down on us.
Yes. Yes, that's the point, right? And in fact, right, we're seeing fires and floods everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And no place is exempt. And I mean, just to start out, Mike, maybe we should just notice what the animals do. They don't say, hey, we're just going to ride this out, all right? They don't look for the pontificator, the cute one, the best dressed, the most erudite. They follow the smartest to higher ground. So my point is, we can learn from the animals. Don't drown, turn around. Let's see how you can turn your assets around so that the floods can happen, the fires can happen, the Titanic can sink, but it doesn't mean that your assets have to go up in flames or, get drowned or go down to the bottom of the sea. You never see it again.
You don't have to get swept away if you're ready for it, I guess.
Right? Well, and that's the point. It's not about the prediction, Mike. It's all about the preparation, right?
Yeah.
If there's a 9.0 earthquake and we're ready for it, we'll probably be able to tell the story. And if there isn't one and we're ready for it, we don't care.
Yeah.
But the point, of course, is that we want to be better prepared than most. And frankly, my friend, the industry, the securities industry, only been in it since 1979, continue to say what we learned 40 years ago. Hold and hope, sit and take it, buy and hold, buy the dips. Live with the losses. And I would say, Mike, this is so fascinating. You probably saw this, a lot of people didn't. This was with Warren Buffett just earlier this year when he was getting a lot of credit for Berkshire Hathaway Holdings approaching $1 trillion in value. Now, he didn't say, look at me, aren't I smart, do what I do. He has nothing to sell, right?
Yeah.
But he does do his homework. And what he said was, that's pretty good. I love the humility. However, if we had limited our losses, it's possible that the valuation could be twice as much as big. So it's
twice as much.
Yeah,
Wow.
it could be $2 trillion. But notice what he's saying, right? If we had done a better job of reducing or limiting our losses, as opposed to staying on the roller coaster, $1 trillion is good. Certainly, $2 trillion would be even better.
Way better. Let me tell you a short story, John. And I always thought I was pretty smart. Went to business school, got all these college degrees, and became a real estate broker. And what I told my clients is, hey, here in Fresno, one thing we can count on: real estate always only goes up. It never goes down. This is in 2008. I'm giving this advice. The value of properties here went to 1/3 the value.
Yes.
I learned a couple things from that. Number one is I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I can't predict the market, not just real estate, but stock market, all these markets. I have no idea. Where do we find out about this stuff?
Well, we do pay for independent research, and you might like to know, back during the last time we saw real estate prices on average drop, and the stats are 34% across the country.
Yeah.
But the research team suggested, unlike anyone else, that we could see a 40% reduction in value. Okay, I think we got pretty close. I'll take 34. That's close enough to me for 40. And again, nobody else was saying this. And it took about 6 years for us to follow find the bottom. In other words, from peak to trough took about 6 years. So it was a very slow moving train wreck. But it certainly reduced a lot of valuation. What they're saying right now, by the way, is when it comes to the real estate market, on average, be not surprised to see prices drop 50 to 60% across the country. Yeah, as high as 70, they suggest. In Phoenix, as low as 14%. In Nashville, but on average about 50%. And one of the things they do, and we'll get to stocks, Mike, and that is they say, look, if you want to get a sense for where prices are headed, you want to look to see when the bubble for that asset class was starting its formation. So they suggest that you go to Zillow. You can only go back 10 years with Zillow. They want you to go back to 2012. You can get to 2014 with Zillow. That's probably pretty close. But what they're saying is that's when they believe the real estate bubble was starting to form, 2012. That's where prices are going to revert before they do whatever they do moving forward. But to your point, notice everything we know about real estate, it happened during the time when we had 76 million people come into this thing called the United States of America. Boomers born 1946 to 1964. So when people want to go back and curl up with the electric blanket from the past, I like to point out, well, let's see. How many times have you seen 76 million people show up? That would be once in the world. That's it. That's all, folks. How many times have you seen 76 million people go to heaven? It hasn't happened yet. Yeah. But stick around, because 76.4 is the average age of death in America, and 78 is the average age, the Census Bureau tells us, when we sell our homes in America. Here comes 76 million people, born 46, reached 77 last year, reaching 78 this year. Here we go into uncharted territory.
You mean we're going to have a lot less people? Is that your point?
Well, you know what? I think that's probably the simplest way to look at it, is this is what happens when people dying outpace people buying, all right? And what we're hearing right now in the news, it's all about shortages, right? However, what we don't recognize, well, I'll ask you, do you have any idea how many vacant homes and apartments there are in America today?
I do not.
Most of us don't. We're so focused on shortage. Well, you know, it's kind of like the 80s. It wasn't 16% 30-year fixed loans that was the impediment for people to buy, because historically, Americans buy their first home at 31, regardless of interest rates, location, inventory, all right? It's just like a bell that was ringing. Nobody really understands it, but everybody's lined up to buy a house. Where there's a lot of demand when you have 76 million people who have to buy a lot of stuff. But what happens when they go away? So yeah, it has to do with looking at the life expectancy of folks. And right now, most of us are astonished, one, to see that there are 11 million sounds like a lot vacant homes in Japan, but there's 16 million vacant homes in these United States of America today. And what are the top two states leading the highest vacancy rate in this country?
Wow.
The first one, most people say it's got to be New York. No, it's actually Florida. Huh? What? Really? Are you kidding me? Yeah. 1.7 million the last time I looked for their number of vacant homes and apartments. California is number 2, Mike, with 1.2 million vacant homes. So there's another story developing. And as I say, let's just recognize all that the history that we've enjoyed has been a function of 76 million people being here. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen with prices and rents? I'll be an optimist. When 76 million people take a while to go to heaven, inventory remains pretty much like a dead person's EKG, pretty flat. Where do you think prices and rents are headed? And I mean, who knows? But we're not going to replace 76 million people with any other group that size. No. So, yeah, I'm going to say it wouldn't surprise me that, people go to heaven, inventory remains the same, and the prices go to a very hot place.
Well, how do people follow this? Like I say, I'm a pretty sharp guy. I follow things like this, but if somebody told me there's going to be a stock market crash or a bubble burst, I'd have no idea. Where do we look for this stuff? Do you have a product there? Does your website give us hints?
You know, no. What I will say is like, let's go back to the earthquake. Who can tell you when it's going to hit?
Yeah, you never know.
No damn bug, okay? Yeah. And if they did, they're probably going to be wrong, and then you'll never hear what they have to say again. Yeah. So my attitude is, let's not try to predict when. Let's just be prepared now. Then we don't care if it ever happens. Yeah. It doesn't matter to us. But the things that we can do, I mean, the research team is saying this is what we think is going to happen in real estate. On the stock market side, they're saying don't be surprised to see 70 to 80% loss in stocks. Wow. Anytime soon. Wouldn't surprise me if that starts to unveil itself in September, so people have some time. But one of the things that I would submit is really smart to do, Mike, is to go back to see how did your portfolio treat you 2022 and 2008. Were you off 38%, 37% or more in 2008 when the market was off 37%? when the market was off, Dow and the S&P were off 20 and NASDAQ was off 30 in 2022. How did your portfolio do? Because, you know, if you fully participated in the declines those two times, not even mentioning 2002, you know, what makes you think you're going to be better prepared for the next time, unless there's some different strategies put in the equation? With real estate, you're either all in or you're all out, okay? With stocks, we're not into gold, and what we do believe is in active management. That means moving the deck chairs off the Titanic, you know, not swapping this deck chair of bonds for that deck chair of bonds, or this deck chair of that stock for that deck chair of that stock, because the whole damn ship sank, okay? No, let's take the chairs off the Titanic and sit them in a money market account. Sit them in cash. We're not going to make any money, but we're not going to lose any money.
Not going to lose, yeah.
Yes, and this is how we might be able to follow some of what Warren Buffett is suggesting, you know, that he wish he had done. The rest of us can learn from him and go, okay, let me see how bad it got. Do I want to go through that again? I mean, Mike, we had one referral. This lady in her 70s, we ran her portfolio backwards, making the assumption that the statement she provided recently was the same holdings were in her account in 2008, all right? Just to kind of give, and the funny thing is the holdings might be somewhat different, but for the most part, people's appetite for whatever it is they hold is pretty much the same. You know, you go from this tech stock to that tech stock. It's all tech, it's all stock. So, market's off 37%. Her account was off 70%. Wow. So yeah, on $1 million, that's what? Minus 700,000?
Yeah.
Hitting you with all of 300,000? And I want to smile at you and say, have a nice day. Good luck with that. This is not going to be pretty. The good news for this particular woman is she wasn't living off this money like everyone else has to. If it's traditional retirement accounts where your required minimum distributions go up every year, no matter what, you can't stop them, and yes, they're taxable, and every year they go up no matter what your account does. But the good news for her is that all of her expenses are really borne by her son. She's living with her son. He's paying all of her expenses. So for her, this was extra money, if you will. For the rest of us, $1 million down to 300,000, right? No. And let's see, what do you think the odds are of getting 300,000 back to $1 million?
Yeah. Take forever.
Well, they're just not good. Yeah, they're not good. And that's my point. We don't want to go through that, you know, and we can't avoid it. So active management and greater diversification. And on this one, it's interesting, Mike, just to look at Yale as an example, Yale Endowment, like $40.7 billion. And they have a site that they really say quite a bit. And what we can see is that in 1989, 3/4 of the portfolio was committed to U.S. stocks, bonds, and cash. 1989. That sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? 75% to stocks, bonds, and cash. That's how most of us, somewhere in that neighborhood, we're 60-40, 40-60. We got maybe two asset classes. Okay, here's what Yale is doing today. Today, domestic marketable securities account for less than 1/10 of the portfolio.
Wow.
So, yeah, last time I looked, it was like at 3%. So they're saying it's at less than 1/10. So that's 10, no more than, not even as much as 10% of 40.7 billion. Last I looked, I could find an actual number. It looked like 3% in U.S. stocks. Again, that's vastly different than the securities industry has told everybody to invest. And they can do something we can't, but we can learn from the best and the brightest. I mean, they've got foreign equity, private equity, absolute return strategies, real assets, and all of that represents 9/10 of the endowment. From what I can see, their biggest position is all of 17%. So what I'm really trying to say is, number one, if you want to see what you can do to limit losses, in real estate, you have to really define, do you love it? Then you might want to keep it, even if it drops 50%. If you want to do that, fine. Otherwise, you might want to take your chips off the table and get ready to play if prices have moved towards you. And as far as the stock market or like retirement accounts are concerned, the 1-2 punch is active management, moving from risk assets to cash and back as the environment makes it appropriate, and then greater diversification outside of cash, bonds, and stocks, and even outside of real estate as well.
Well, taking into consideration what you just said, can you go back and restate that, what Warren Buffett about, you know, not taking the losses or avoiding the losses?
Yeah. This is, probably he's right there again at $1 trillion in market capitalization. And the way he put it in February is that's good, good for us. But if we had done a better job of reducing our losses, it's conceivable that the $1 trillion of market capitalization for Berkshire Hathaway could be twice that, or $2 trillion. I think he said a lot right there for all of us to study. That's what I see.
I feel like a lot of us are like trying to get rich quick. We got these stocks and they're going up and they're going up and going up, and maybe our greed would keep us from saying, hey, let's just switch to money market for a while and just avoid, because we know a loss is coming sooner or later. We don't know when, we can't guess it, and don't be so greedy and avoid the loss.
What do we learn? Greed is good, right? Greed is good? Yeah. And is that what we're repeating ourselves, whether we're a politician or a business owner or, an investor? We get high on fill in the blank, whatever it might be, something we think we know, and so we double down and just keep hoping that the sky is the limit. This will keep going. Now, let me put some good news in your listeners and your audience's ears, Mike, and that is one of the areas that we like. We're cognizant of how the real estate and the stock markets may upend themselves. All right, and by the way, with Japan, the stock market peaked 1989, dropped 80% in about a year or so. A year later, the real estate market in Japan dropped 70%. Wow. From what I can see, so we saw stocks and real estate drop 80% for stocks and 70% for real estate in Japan. From what I can see, Mike, both of those areas of investment have just gotten back to their high water marks of 1989 and 1990, respectively.
Yeah.
So, and that means you didn't sell the house and you didn't sell the stock.
Right.
Okay, you held on to those shares. They almost went down for never to be seen, but you couldn't take out, you didn't sell a share. You had to keep those shares for you to fully recover. But let's understand, that was what, 30, 35 years ago?
Yeah.
So could that happen here? By the way, it has happened here after the Depression. Stocks took 25 years. New York real estate took 4 decades to get back to even. So these things can happen. And when it comes to real estate, you're either all in or all out. So if you have a bunch of extra houses, this might be a good time to capture top dollars. Mm-hmm. And with the retirement accounts, active management and diversification, one of the areas that we do like has to do with student housing, right? Every student, somebody paid for that residence. Yep. And during COVID, if you had kids at home, you still had to pay for the room that they weren't at school during COVID, right? Yep. So I'm going to say that's probably a cash cow. A good client of ours, he's a rocket scientist, she's a broker, and they own property near USC, Mike, and they tell me USC has 8,000 rental units and a waiting list of 40,000.
Yeah, you can't get in.
That looks like a cash cow to me. So there's a way that you and I, ordinary investors, can take a position in student housing outside of California, which I think is an advantage. The second area that we like a lot right now, and we think will hold up both in terms of yield and return, is data center infrastructure, right? All of the equipment, all the room you needed for artificial intelligence, that has to work 10 times faster than Google. So to me, it's kind of like being Levi Strauss, right? He wasn't panning for gold. Right. He wasn't selling picks and shovels. He was selling jeans. It was like 1837, something like that. I mean, it's still around. It's still an iconic name. My point is, when we can take a position in things that people just have to use, student housing, data center infrastructure that has to work 24/7, 365, 4 layers of backup to keep all these machines just humming. Yeah. A 300,000 square foot building, does it have a bathroom? It may or may not.
May not need it,
It's no tenants, no toilets, no nothing that you have to deal with, no trash, a sweep a broom. Place is clean, just keep the machines humming so we can get everything we can out of this artificial intelligence. But let's own that infrastructure, the real estate that houses that infrastructure, and I think we can look forward to maintaining, no matter what, good yield and a solid return.
I want to ask you to digress in a different direction.
Sure.
Any thoughts on Bitcoin?
Yeah, FINRA and the SEC have yet to approve Bitcoin, so it's not really even something that we can really discuss with in terms of it being an option. There are those who still feel like we're not there yet. So it's not for most for those who have securities licenses at this particular juncture. Bitcoin is really kind of verboten. Maybe that will change.
It's just kind of an unknown now.
It's an unknown now.
I don't even know what it is, to tell you the truth.
Well, and see, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
I was talking to my in-laws. They said, "Well, it's virtual," and I go, "What's that?"
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't understand virtual.
Yeah.
That's an asset class.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Not
But
for you, right.
and Buffett also says, "Know what you own." And to
Right.
your point, there's so many of these things that they might be somehow increasing in value, but that doesn't mean it's authentic.
Right.
It'll make you feel smart because it's going up, but when it doubles down off, some
Yeah.
ridiculous amount, then that makes you feel kind of dumb. What I'm really saying is, when we look at data center infrastructure
Yeah.
and student housing,
yeah.
know what you own, and that's one of the things that
Right.
Warren Buffett said smart investors do. They take the time to figure out, what do I own, and that way you can really evaluate, should I own more, should I own less? But if I don't know anything, well then I'm kind of like that, my head stuck in the sand, exposing some very dear parts, not knowing what the heck I'm doing.
Now, I know we're way past time, but let me just ask you, we have your web address on the screen, john.l.grace@lpl.com. What would our viewers find there?
Well, we've got a number of the interviews, like yours. We post those. My book is available, Making Finance Make Sense. Other articles, written articles, along with interviews, we post on that site. And we like to answer questions. So to the extent that people have questions, even for 15 minutes, to try to get a sense for, is your portfolio going to do to you again what it did before? Okay, what would you like to do about it? What kind of loss would be okay with you? We're not going to ask you, are you conservative, moderate, or aggressive, Mike? Because frankly, I don't understand the question, so why would I insult you with a question? Yeah, I don't understand, you don't understand, that's crazy. No, let's dig deeper and figure out, is the number that you could live with 12%? And then, if possible, could we conceivably design the portfolio so that it might perform in a bad year within your parameters?
Yeah.
That way you can smile as opposed to me telling you, hey, just sit and take it, Mike.
Great. Well, thank you, John. We should have you every day if we could, but I've learned a lot, actually. Sometimes learning what you don't know is very important. Sometimes we think we know it all, and it turns out a lot of us just don't know.
What's the name of the gentleman who's CEO of Microsoft?
Bill Gates?
Microsoft? Not anymore.
I don't know. The CEO, okay. I don't know.
Yeah, he took the job in 2014.
Yeah.
I believe he's originally Indian or Southeast Asian.
Right.
I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, so I'm not going to butcher it. But here's what he said when he took the job. What he found was the company, Microsoft, had a culture of everybody's a know-it-all. Okay? And he said what he found he had to do starting in day one is flip that culture into making sure everybody knew, no, the job I want you to undertake is your job is to learn it all. Whole different attitude. Let's see how much we can learn, as opposed to me slam down what I think I know, and it may or may not. I mean, how long did we think? How long did we know, Mike? The world was flat. There's no such thing as gravity. We all knew this when we were back there, right? Well, if we move into learning, we see it's not quite what we thought.
All right, John. Investor's Advantage. His website's on the screen. He knows a lot. We got to be ready. Just be ready. I think that's his message today. Thank you, John.
Let's get ready. Amen, Mike. Thanks so much. See you next time.
And we'll be back with more right after this.